All right. Welcome to the May 2021 Rocky Mountain Railroad Club show. As you can see, I brought Dave down tonight. He's actually hosting from my place. So
co-hosting.
Yeah. So we're both trying to squeeze in here. Hopefully you can hear us all quite well. So as usual, we'll do a few, bits of news and announcement from Denny and Dave first. Take any other things that come in, and then we'll go straight to our guest speaker for tonight, Bruce Barrett. And as usual, we'll keep everybody muted through the show. We'll ask that you hold your questions till the end. And then when Bruce finishes his presentation, we'll go ahead and open it up so you can take yourself off mute. And if you just do that, ask your question and then go back on mute so we don't pick up stray audio, that would be appreciated. So that said, let me ask our president to unmute. Denny.
Good evening. Thanks again, Nathan, for driving this electronic collage for a meeting. And hi, Dave. Nice to see you. This is kind of an interesting situation. So, and welcome, Bruce, because I've heard about trackage rights all my life, and now I might actually learn something about them. So it's a meeting that I'm glad that we're having a presentation and that they've got you together with that kind of stuff. We're going on into the spring and summer, and I don't know, I guess eventually we may have some fall opportunities to meet in physical, but at the moment, it is what it is. There is a board meeting next Monday night, and as always, anybody that's interested in the club that got comments or whatever, let us know. And I'm still on behalf of a couple of people looking for any early 40s rail reports. If anybody's got any out there that they come about, we'd sure like to maybe have them to continue the collection that we've got. And we've got a number of grants in. So this board meeting will go through the grants and award 5 grants is our theory. And there's some kind of interesting ones, including rebuilding the Palisades as for some stuff. So in any case, I welcome everybody here tonight. And I'm going to turn this over to Dave, who will make some announcements and about Sunday and some other things. And then we'll go into the program.
Okay, thanks, Denny. So the reason I'm here at Nathan's house is I had a job in Pueblo today, and I wasn't sure if I could get back to Denver before our meeting started. And so here we are. We're doing it from Command Central in Colorado Springs. I know that just some updates of what's going on in various things, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of things that I miss. Up in Como, Jeff Badger happened to be in town last week, and I think they got the rods back on the engine number 4 up there. I know they're still working to try and have steam for Boreas Pass Railroad Day, probably in August. I think we'll let the South Park Rail Society folks make that announcement when they're ready. Also, there's been a little bit of rumors on the internet that Union Pacific Steam may have an adventure this summer. I spoke with Ed Dickens about 15 minutes ago, just because I try not to spread anything that's not true. And he said that they will make an announcement when they're ready on their UP Steam Facebook page. But they will have a trip in August. They have not announced yet where it will go, but it's going to be one of those 3 or 4 week adventures. So, and I think this will be with the big boy, with details to come. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot else to tell folks. Coming up next weekend at the Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, there will be 3 narrow gauge steam engines all hot at the same time. We don't think that's been done before. This would be the Rio Grande 491 and 346 and Rio Grande Southern number 20. The Railroad Club had hoped to have some sort of a club event with the 20 last year, but due to the pandemic, that all got put on hold. So we're going to try and have a little bit of an event this coming weekend, but if we do, it's probably just for the members. So sorry for those of you that aren't members. We'll try to catch you in the future. And I think now I'd like to go ahead and introduce Bruce Barrett, if that's okay. Bruce has had a several decades long career in Class 1 railroading, and he will explain to those of us that don't know what trackage rights means, because sometimes we hear that term tossed around, and maybe after his program tonight, we'll have a much better understanding. So Bruce, would you like to hop in here?
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be able to come in. There we go. Let me get back.
Sorry, Bruce, I need to make you host again.
Okay.
I just wanted to spotlight you such that you stayed on the screen.
All righty. Okay, let's go here. Okay. As we take a look at what trackage rights is and everything, it's really nice to see that there's different railroads represented as we go out and take pictures or watch trains and things. That why are they there? How did they get there? And then behind the scenes, the massive amount of coordination and work that it takes to keep that operating, keep it working, and make it work for the future. So let's just dive into that. And again, let's take your questions at the end and jot those down, and we'll chase rabbits as you would like. Well, my screen is frozen. Hang on a second. Let me go back a second. We tested this, but it did not take. So let me go back. My apologies. I thought we had this going. Let's go back to share. Nathan, could I have screen share back, please?
Yeah, give me 2 seconds here. Denny was stuck on the screen for some reason. I'm trying to make sure we're looking at you and not him.
It's always good to look at the president. I mean, why not?
Well, that's fine. There. Yeah, I'll get this to work here in just a second.
Alrighty.
There you go. You are once again host.
Okay, let's try this. And full screen. Let's see if, here we go. Okay. My background a bit is just to run through some of this. I worked for BNSF for just short of 40 years, and that included time with Santa Fe up until the merger. So started out as a locomotive engineer and got to run Denver to Pueblo and Denver to La Junta with the Q trains and things. Finished my degree work, worked on special projects for the Santa Fe up to and including helping with some of the groundwork for the merger, and then crew management for a while, 8 years at Trackage Rights desk, where I was the liaison between UP and BNSF at the Harriman Dispatch Center, and my last 8 years at joint facilities. So a lot of what I did was around trackage rights. So I got to actually run on 2 different continents, Denver to Pueblo for about 20 years. And then I was a guest operator down at the New South Wales Railway in Australia and did a few classes on new SD40s and the how to power brake and some other air things down there. I was on vacation, so that was a fun time to go do that. Trackage rights agreements. Well, what are they? How do we have those things? Trackage rights are defined as it's the right to operate your own trains on a foreign railroad's track with your own crews. And a trackage rights agreement covers lots of things. What are your rights? What rates cover the maintenance, dispatching, ownership? What can you do? What you can't do? On and off points? Who can you interchange with? So we're going to delve into quite a few of those as examples tonight. Now, trackage rights can either be mutually agreed upon by two carriers or more and find common ground, and we'll look at some of those tonight. And others are mandated by the Interstate Commerce Commission or now the Surface Transportation Board. So you can have these combinations that all affect trackage rights. They can be overhead rights to the tenant, or you can have additional rights. And we'll take a look at a few examples in those as well tonight. Well, most of my career, BNSF trackage rights. This is the Trackage Rights Map. If you look at the lines that are highlighted in yellow, that is BNSF on a foreign carrier, and the blue is a foreign carrier on BNSF. So there's about 8,000 plus miles BNSF runs on foreign carriers, and 5,000 miles where foreign carriers are on BNSF. Trackage rights can be fairly complex, and let's take an example. This I call the trackage rights maze, and that's right here in Pueblo, Colorado. And as you can see, the tracks in black don't have trackage rights on them, and the colored highlighted tracks are all trackage rights in one form or another. Now, we will take a look at what's joint operations in some, and so BNSF kind of does define those joint agreements as trackage rights. So I'm going to do the same thing here tonight. But if you take a look at the top of the screen, that orange and red, that's trackage rights going towards Denver. The blue, as we go counterclockwise, that's going to Canyon City. South goes to Walsenburg. The yellow is at the Comanche Power Plant. Green goes down from the Southern Junction route into Pueblo Junction. Turquoise is out towards NA Junction, Kansas City. So you can see that it can be fairly complex, and it behooves those that are the operating team, those in joint facilities, those that are in maintenance, to know what those joint facilities are, know what the trackage rights are, know what you can and cannot do on those trackage rights, because the consequences can be fairly severe. Well, the agreement interpretation, you always want to interpret the agreement to your own advantage. And sometimes that gets real complex. Sometimes it gets real gray in that. And when I spent the time at the Harriman Center, I had to interpret the agreements and also help UP interpret those agreements when we disagreed and come to common ground with that. And when we couldn't come to common ground, that's when we started tearing hair out and had little meetings with the Surface Transportation Board and lawyers, etc. So sometimes trackage rights were one of the most challenging portions of my career. So let's take a look at some of those. And here's an example of a trackage rights. Here you have a UP train and a BNSF train on the same track. If you were not familiar with where we were at, you wouldn't know who owns the ground down below. So as an operator and as a supervisor, we had to know all of those pieces. I was stationed in Omaha, Nebraska, as the liaison with the UP from 1998 to 2005. And my office was in the Harriman Center, which is the dispatching heart of the Union Pacific. So here's my desk in the Harriman Center, and I had to definitely define that desk so that people that work for UP would know that they were passing by a desk of the BNSF. So here's the picture from up at the head house end of the Harriman Center. And this is the top floor. And my desk is back here where the cursor is. I'm circling where my desk is. On the right-hand side are the Southern Pacific dispatchers that came out of Denver when Rio Grande SP merged. In the center of the right-hand portion are the corridor managers and the directors. If you would take a look at one of the fun things I got to do, I got to really harass some of the senior management at UP. And if we have Union Pacific people on here, I really won't apologize for that, but I had a lot of fun at it. But you can see a BNSF calendar hanging in a dispatcher's cubicle. And if you look on the way back, there was a BNSF calendar in every dispatcher's cubicle. Now, this was just before the UP Board of Directors walked through the Harriman Center. And so the president of the UP came over to my desk and we had a short but lively discussion about the BNSF calendars. And so anyway, I did have fun with that. They got all torn down that day. And when he came back the next morning, they were all back up. So we had fun with that. Down below that level is what is called the UP bunker. This is the UP dispatchers that have been there since the Harriman Center was transformed from a freight house into the dispatching center. And the Feather River dispatcher is right here with Floyd is looking at the screens. On the left-hand side is where the UP directors and general directors sit. So I had access to all of the UP dispatchers and directors, corridor managers, etc. That was a fun part of my job. I also had a fun part of being in Omaha when they did fun things like roll around 844 or the UP Heritage engines. Well, let's take a look at some of those trackage rights. Let's look at one that did not take a long time to consummate. As we mentioned, sometimes it takes a lot of effort to put those agreements together. And so this is what we call the Central Corridor, runs on this area of the screen in yellow. And so it is where the BNSF got to run on the new Union Pacific after the UP SP merger. So it goes from Denver, and we run all the way to California. Now, this is Lodi, California, where the Golden Bear Arch is an iconic symbol of Lodi. So those of you that have been to Winter Rail out there, that used to be near the Stockton area where we had Winter Rail. But so we staged this picture, and it's on SP Trackage, as one of your members pointed out. But it is the local that comes out of Stockton, runs up to the Sacramento area, and we were given rights on that area. It also gave opportunity to see trains of BNSF on areas that you never really would have imagined seeing UP have a BNSF locomotive out there. Here we have a director's special coming out of the Moffett Tunnel, and that's, dyed-in-the-wool Rio Grande, but we've got a BNSF train that has rights out there at this point. Now, the rights go through Fraser here, and then Steamboat. Here you have in the upper left-hand corner, there's a BNSF train there, and the UP coal train is down on the main there. So coal load headed east, and then a manifest that is going to be headed west. So we have a lot of interesting times there as to what can and can you not do on those, and that's where trackage rights comes in. What commodities can you carry if there's any limitations? What can you do as far as serving industries along the way, etc. So we have to know, as operations and joint facilities teams, what those rights are, and you have to know them very, very well. Here's a train that came out of the Everett, Washington, and is passing the Stockton depot and going to go into Mormon Yard there at Stockton. This is one of the most hotly contested pieces of trackage that we have. And how do we pay for those? How do we have the rights to serve, et cetera? So as we look at the center of that trackage rights area, we had overhead rights, and then we also have rights to interchange with trains that, or railroads, I should say, that are along the route. This one is the Utah Railway. We had rights to access them at Provo and at Martin, Utah. And we also needed to look at having someone do some switching for us. UP initially ran some crews for us from Denver. We very quickly established our own crew base, which was allowed by the Surface Transportation Board. So we needed someplace to switch cars. Utah Railway had some available yard trackage, so we got to take about a 10 or 11 month time period of negotiating with the UP to allow the Utah Railway to act as our agents in the Provo and the Salt Lake Valley. And we'll get into that more in just a little bit as we look at where they serve and how they do that. But here we have a Denver to Stockton train stopped at Provo, and they're doing some switching for us there. I managed the entire route from Denver to Stockton, did the day-to-day operations with it as to what we're doing and tonnage, set outs, pickups, etc. So I really got to know what was going on. And I spent probably more time on this corridor than I did any other portions of the 6,300 miles that I was responsible for. Also got to go out there a lot, and the Wasatch Valley was very nice to visit and photographically enticing. So that was very nice to be able to get out there and do that. But UP would like to challenge us at every place they could. So they would dispatch us maybe poorly to some extent, or it'd take us 2 or 3 crews to get across there. So you can imagine that sitting at the trackage rights desk, I had a bullseye painted on both sides of my head because somebody was not happy with us and with what I was doing, whether it's somebody at BNSF on the 6,300 miles of railroad or somebody at UP or one of the other railroads. And it's something that we were doing. We would try to horsepower the trains correctly. And sometimes we would find that a locomotive was missing, and I would have a general director or vice president at my desk saying, why will this train not get over Donner Pass? And we would find out that a UP quarter manager confiscated one of our locomotives, and it was sitting at Elko, Nevada. So I got to have some fun with that. And, okay, what are we going to do with that locomotive, and how are you going to get my train over your railroad? So those are some of the differences, disagreements that we had, and how we would work through all of those pieces. And we mentioned the STB dictating trackage rights, and this is one of those cases. The UP merger was consummated in 1995, and in June 1, 1996, this agreement was in place. So you can see it didn't take a long time of negotiations because the STB said, you need to make this happen. Well, also along the way, we have some issues that surfaced, and that was the Utah Transit Authority. UP sold track to the Utah Transit Authority, and there were great arguments and discussions amongst the management, and I got to be involved in quite a few of those, as to, okay, how does that impact our running and our access to trains where they actually are running on the UP, and we have trackage rights over those. So that was some of the very challenging discussions that we had. And I had some very, very good rapport with some vice presidents there that I had worked at the Harriman Center. And we were able to kind of hash those things out to amenable circumstances and make things work right. West of Salt Lake City, there's two routes, the SP route that goes over the causeway and the former WP route that heads out west. Both of those end up out into the Elko area. And so this is the route on the WP that we have trackage rights on. Here's a stack train eastbound. And so UP would crew the BNSF trains west of Salt Lake City all the way to Roseville for us. And that was mandated by the Surface Transportation Board. You can imagine that there was very little interest with the folks at UP really wanting to crew a BNSF competitor's train across the Central Corridor, but they had to do that. And so that was part of the agreement. We also had rights to some customers. This is out at Fernley. This became very, very hotly contested as during my tenure, I had great relationships with the marketing people, educated them on what we could and could not do in serving customers out there. And we built a wonderful trackage base out in Western Nevada from the Sparks, Reno area and over to the Fernley Patrick area. And we developed a lot of customers here. This is the Tahoe Reno Industrial Park. And I was privileged to help get a lot of customers in there. And we'll get into that on the day-to-day operations with it. But you go west of Elko there, and you have, again, two ways. You got the Donner Pass. This is a train coming off of Donner Pass going to Roseville. And then you also have the Ketty route through the Feather River Canyon. BNSF had rights to both. And this picture's kind of a telling story because the UP train actually is going to take the track that goes to the left on your screen, and that goes on towards Salt Lake City. The track on the right is actually BNSF track that goes up to the Oregon and Washington area. So that is one of the pieces that BNSF got in the merger agreement that WP had gone up there before, so we actually took that portion of the track over. And very, very good. So just a night shot at Pulga. With that, we didn't have the rights to serve a lot of industry up at that area. In fact, zero up in on the Feather River Canyon area. All of our customers were going to be in the Winnemucca Elko area, and that became very hotly contested. So the trackage rights spell out exactly what you can and cannot do on those areas. And when things go bump in the night, go on the ground, it also spells out what the liabilities are. So there's numerous times I'd get awakened in the middle of the night and we have somebody on the ground or cars in the river. What are we going to do? How do we pick those up, and who pays for the costs of those items? Being in the area, I also was privileged to lead several little forays in the Feather River Canyon. This is a winter rail group. And here we have Trains Magazine, Canon cameras, and the winners of the photographic contest that I got to take on a Feather River Canyon tour. And that was kind of a fun side benefit. We also had mudslides and things at the Feather River Canyon. This is just east of Pulga. And so coming out of the Dark Canyon, and on the other end of the Dark Canyon have the a Everett to Barstow train at James in there. So as we look at the trackage at Stockton, again, this is from our title slide. If you just look at the picture, you have no idea whose train is on whose track. And actually, the Santa Fe train is on UP track, and the UP engines are on Santa Fe track there at Stockton. So it can be a very confusing piece for not only the crews and dispatchers, but the managers as well. Well, as we look at that area, we also see day-to-day service on trackage rights that I was responsible for. This is a graphic of the Utah Railway. And if you see in the upper left-hand corner, the orange, that is where Utah Railway was operating as the BNSF agent. And you can see that that agreement was 1998. So it took us almost 2 years to negotiate that operation and be able to start servicing customers in the Salt Lake City area all the way up to Ogden and out to Magna, which is Kennecott Copper. So we were able to establish base and leased tracks. That was also part of our responsibility. How do you lease tracks and service industries on a foreign railroad? So that was very, very difficult to get negotiated. And so Utah Railway didn't have the power. So BNSF footed some of the engines. This is one of our SD40s over there and a couple of their Jeep 35s trying to do switching there at Midvale. That's where we established a 7-track yard, actually bought and built a 7-track yard that still exists there. That's one of 3 places where BNSF in the Central Corridor actually has a footprint that we own out there. One of them is at Parachute, Colorado. The other one is the Midvale area where we have a 7-track stub end yard. And then Fernley, Nevada, where we have 3 tracks and a bunch of other leased track in it that we actually own the footprint on 2 tracks out there. So in the area managing what we do on a day-to-day basis out there, you can't just let it run on its own. So you got to have somebody watch it. And that was part of my responsibility. Try to encourage and service customers well, grow our base of operation out there. And Kennecott Copper was one of our main opportunities and a great target for us. So 2 railroads served smelter or the Kennecott Copper main area. And if you see the line of cars just below the hillside there, that's the former Rio Grande track, which BNSF had rights to. So we would bring cars in and out of the upper yard. The lower yard is the Union Pacific track, and they have a much larger yard in there, but we were still able to garner the lion's share of the acid business and be able to go out and serve that customer very, very well. And UP had a lot of roadblocks, and that's just part of being playing the game of trackage rights. If you own the railroad and the former railroad, there's a lot of things you can do to have roadblocks, such as put a tie gang out there or remove a switch, and we'll have that switch back in service in a week, which caused a phone call to the Surface Transportation Board. So at any rate, that's a complex piece of managing the day-to-day operations. And so it was a challenging but very rewarding piece of my career. The Utah Railway also switched industries north of the Salt Lake City area. Here we have the Freeport Center at Clearfield, Utah, which is a former military supply depot that is turned into the just industries and warehouses. We developed a large number of customers out here that were very, very dedicated to BNSF and their service. So if you have one of those plastic tables that has a metal frame in it, and it has the life emblem on it, then yep, that's one of these customers out here, and they are located. Excuse me, that's Thiokol. This is where the Life Products is at with it. And we also serve Thiokol out there. Thiokol made the boosters for the shuttle. We did not haul those as we had limitations on tunnels on our route west of Denver, so we couldn't haul the boosters, but we did haul raw materials, metal, and the fuel supplements, etc., that they tested with out on the bases. So that was a good piece of new business. But we got the rights there because this Freeport Center was served not only by the Union Pacific, which is this track right here, but it was served by the Rio Grande. So we were able to gain access to those customers in what is called 2-to-1. So it went from 2 carriers, and the merger left them only with 1 alternative. So we came in as the second alternative for competition to serve the customers. Here's Utah Railway switching some of the tank cars and lumber, et cetera, that customers there in the Freeport Center would go ahead and use. Up at Ogden, Utah, we got the rights to interchange with the Utah Central. That's their engines on the right-hand side. A former Kennecott copper engine is the second out locomotive, one of their Jeep 38s with the high cab. And the engine in the middle of your screen, that's the 613 that we would dispatch from Provo on up to Ogden with the setouts for the Ogden customers up there. It was a good time. It was an active business up there, and took a good deal of time to manage that properly and also oversee the Utah Railway management and crews. I had a very good relationship with those gentlemen out there. Here's one of the Utah Central locomotives that was on the property a little later. Well, here's the one crew that took a great deal of my time and a great deal of my pride. This is the switch crew that is from, we called them the Sparks Switcher. And this crew, I got to manage them on a day-to-day basis, giving them safety briefings, lining up customers and working with them on a day-to-day basis. Got to know them extremely well. And these gentlemen are UP employees, and they became such great friends of mine over the years. And they thought of themselves as BNSF employees, although their paycheck came in yellow and gray. They answered to me, and anything that we had to do with discipline or anything else went through me. And that was a great time in my career, managing this crew. And they did the old-fashioned type of local service. They called the customers. We got them cell phones to call and talk to the customers and turn them loose. Let them know what it is that I wanted them to do and turn them loose. And these folks had such great pride in their work that we grew the business out there, and these 3 men became a target of the UP. And I got to be the lightning rod to keep the UP off of these guys. They tried to fire them several times, and unfortunately, I didn't let them. These locomotives out at the QTC, which is one of our areas of service out there. And so we had a good deal of service out there in the area, good marketing. This is back up the Tahoe Reno Industrial Park. We brought in James Hardy up there, and these are all BNSF loads that were just UP was mattered in a wet hand about. We also brought Tesla in there, although at that point they were not rail served. They did bring in quite a few things and offloaded them, not on the Tesla property, but Tesla is a big, big tenant out at the Tahoe Reno Industrial Park. Out at Elko, we had the UP do our work for us, and that was again mandated by the STB. So the locals that went west out of Elko out to the gold fields, and so we had lots of diesel and lots of raw materials, things for building the gold mining that is huge in the area. And BNSF was a great part of growing that burgeoning business out there. And so UP was mad about that. They would lose cars for us and shuttle things back and forth. So that required getting on airplanes, flying in and out of Elko. And if you've never flown in and out of Elko with the heat of the desert, bring your white knuckles with you. It's a treat. Let me put it that way. We also got to manage the folks out in California that did switching at the McClellan Industrial Park, which used to be the McClellan Air Force Base. And we would have our local go up from Stockton, that's the one that went by the Lodi Arch, and come up to service customers in the Sacramento area and out here at McClellan Industrial Park. Now let's take a look at a agreement that took a lot longer to negotiate, and that is going to be the joint line agreement from Denver to Pueblo. That one started out with Santa Fe getting CNS into a trackage rights agreement. The line on the CNS had washed out several times. CNS and Santa Fe got together and did a trackage rights agreement as well as a crew agreement in 1900. It's actually started in 1899 and finally consummated in 1900, to where the CNS trains would go south on the Santa Fe track and to Pueblo and back north. And the Rio Grande had their own track and their own operation. Now here we have looking from basically Palmer Lake back towards Denver, and you can see where the two trains kind of get near to each other back here. And this is where one of the crossovers used to be, where trains ended up changing ownership, or track ended up ownership over and under. So in the operation today, the track underneath changes ownership 5 times between South Denver and Bragdon. And so the maintenance crews had to know exactly where their ownership was. The crews had to understand the differences in mileposts, because you would be, let's say the coal train here that is in the SAG waiting to go over Palmer Lake. Back here, the mileposts are in the 700s, but as soon as you get down off of here, you are in the 40s. So we had a reef of train orders, and that was very complex. So it took negotiations with the UP to iron that out, and now it's much safer operation. You have the mileposts are continuous from Denver down to Pueblo, and makes it a much safer operation. We also had to negotiate the maintenance, which about 4 years ago, we changed the maintenance to where you don't have to maintain 1.5 miles of track. It's southbound is maintained by BNSF, northbound maintained by the UP. And we also had to negotiate dispatching, and that was consummated here just a couple of years ago as well. So trackage rights can be very, very complex. It can also be very, very expensive. After I left the Harriman Center, I was assigned to the Joint Facilities team, and this became one of my contracts, as well as the Central Quarter, that I got to try to work through all the budgeting issues and the budgeting shortfalls and overages and things. You get to explain all of those to senior management, and that's can be a challenging time. So complex issues to where you got interesting operations for us to look at as rail fans, as admirers of the railroad industry. But behind the scenes, there's a very complex machine to make all of this work. Here's the Nixon coal train. This will soon be something of the past. It's going into the Drake power plant, and Drake is changing from coal to natural gas, and then will be decommissioned. But this is one of the last coal trains going in there. And as I understand it, they're working the coal pile down, and then we'll start on the natural gas in there. But have to know who industries you can and cannot switch. BNSF did not have rights to Drake. Here's the BNSF switcher in the yard in Colorado Springs. In the track going to Drake is the track on the far left, main line, next one over, siding, and then the yard tracks 1 through 9. A lot of the industry here has moved out by the encouragement of Colorado Springs. And so the lumber yards and things that we used to switch down here have moved out, and some of them moved down to Kelker, etc. We also used to do pickups and setouts here, and the crews had to know which track we could use to do the setouts and pickups, but did not have the rights to interchange with the Rio Grande or UP at this time at Colorado Springs. Here's a picture at Bragdon, and this picture is kind of interesting because this is where some trackage rights, the South Denver to Bragdon trackage rights end, or if you're northbound starts, and then other trackage rights begin. And there's 3 agreements that, if you look at the gondola cars out there, those gondola cars are sitting on 3 separate agreements. And that is interesting to understand how and why. You can imagine if a train derails to this area, have to dig through the liabilities and understand what the liabilities are and who pays for those liabilities in what proportion. And then you also get to bill the tenant company for operating on the track and for the maintenance on the track as well. Well, there's one of the most interesting pieces of the railroad is probably the Powder River Basin. And the Powder River Basin is a joint facility with that. But we do want to take a look at that, the Oren line. The Chicago Northwestern wanted to build in there. So in 1983, there was the agreement that Shawnee to portion of the mines, and that was modified back in 1986 to go all the way up to the north end of the mines at Kabyle. So as we expanded the rail, it's called capital improvement. How do you build that, and in what proportion do you build those? And that's all spelled out in the agreement. So as you think of the massive amount of coal trains that have generated and are run out of the Powder River Basin, each and every one of those has to be accounted for in the billing and liabilities that are spelled out within the agreement. So administering those, as you can imagine, is pretty interesting. Access to which mines that the railroads had is also crucial, because you don't want to allow someone into your franchise that you have not negotiated. So there is a large pressure upon the operating team, the dispatching team, joint facilities, and the liaison in Omaha to make sure that UP stays within the rights that were granted them in that Oren line agreement. And I got to do a lot of lot of nice tours out there, touring the mines and a lot of places that the general public just doesn't get to go. So I had a lot of fun with that as well. Things can get real complex. Here we have a UP train loaded, getting ready to head south because they do not have rights to go out the north end. BNSF has rights out of both ends, and UP does not. So we erected one of these signs that said, "Begin joint line territory," so that when UP's out there looking around, they know that they cannot go beyond that sign. And also when we train the dispatchers need to understand where they can line trains, where they cannot do that. So here's Bill, Wyoming, BNSF Bill, and the UP load is headed south. It will change crews at UP Bill and then head out across Shawnee. Here's mine that we got to a loadout that I got to witness building and everything, getting it into service. This is the West Black Thunder mine, and that conveyor heads all the way over to the Black Thunder mine where things are loaded. Those are some of the highest volume loadings that we used to have on the BNSF out there. And this is the Antelope yard with the train coming off of the Logan Hill. Correction, going to Logan Hill. So from the Powder River, we've got lots of different other trackage rights out there. This is the Barrett sub that goes over the former Texas and Pacific. BNSF has rights from Fort Worth to Sweetwater, gets back on our own railroad there, but we got to go out and see how that operation works. And that after UP took it over, their traffic volume, especially with the intermodal, increased tremendously out there. So where else do we have trackage rights? Well, there's Tehachapi. This one is very hotly contested, and as the maintenance work goes on out there, we have different improvement projects that have been talked about over the years, and the trackage rights involves how do you make all of those improvements and services work, how do the dispatchers work, up to the point that we finally moved the dispatchers into one area, which is San Bernardino dispatch area, and that those dispatchers dotted line to me in Omaha, and so that was a wonderful thing to get to do, is come out to California now and then and see what's going on out here. But those dispatchers are the subject going back to Omaha, and I do not know if that's actually been done or not, so I apologize for not having that answer. UP got rights when the Santa Fe and the Burlington Northern merger took place. They got rights to go from Fort Worth up to Pueblo, get back on their own railroad. So STB gave them rights to do that. Here's a potash empty headed over the undulating territory in Texas called Bellevue. And then we also have Kansas City Southern got rights up to Council Bluffs to get to the grain operations. So those were concessions made by the STB to different carriers. Also had NS. This is a older agreement that we BNSF owned the track, and then we got on former NS track at Glake Yard, and they did the switching for us. So that was another one that NS and got to have conversations with me frequently about operations up there as to operations, locomotives, failures, etc. And so I got to manage this one as well. But that was due to, again, washout on the NS. And so the agreement was negotiated with the Burlington Northern and to run on their track, and then pulled up the NS track. Well, people buy track too. Here we have the rail runner in New Mexico purchased a rail in up to Richardson and on to Santa Fe. So now BNSF is a tenant out there. And so we got to chat with rail runners several times and worked through some growing pains and dispatching and operations out there. That was always fun to do. Well, how do you see your territory? You get to go on business trains a lot. So I got to do color commentary on quite a few business trains. And so this is one where we're in the hole and watching Amtrak go by at French on the Albuquerque to Topeka tour. And then here we are in the middle of the Moffett Tunnel with a vice presidential tour. And again, I was doing the color commentary on this one, and the supervision would rely on me for a lot of the color commentary over the years. And I took great pride in being able to know my railroad very, very well and train the new people that came on board. Sitting down near the window is a new vice president that just had inherited this territory. So we're giving Jeff Wright a little tour. And same train west to Elko. So you just don't imagine seeing BNSF on former WP track out there. We also got to meet a lot of interesting people. So you may recognize this young man, and you've if you read Trains Magazine, you probably read a lot of articles by Fred Fraley, and he was an honored guest on one of the trains that we got to go. And in fact, this is the one, Albuquerque to Topeka. Fred got to go with us. And here we are again, coming out of the Moffett Tunnel with the train. Crossings, trackage rights, it's a little different animal, but that trackage rights desk gets to handle a lot of the problems with crossings. And here we have Northport, Nebraska as to who's got rights, who's first, who's second. So the history is very, very important as to who was there first. And those are the ones that the lion's share of the time always control the crossings at grade. You have conflicts from time to time, and here's one that we had with the Short Line Railroad in Walsenburg, Colorado. And it escalated to the point that this is a group of the Short Line Railroad, San Luis Rio Grande, met. The Surface Transportation Board had a team out there, and BNSF had a contingent, and trying to work through the allegations and what's going on. Long story short, the BNSF prevailed in the argument. STB said that San Luis Rio Grande, their case did not hold enough water to continue the negotiations. Well, speaking of water, boo-boos happen along the way. So trackage rights kind of gets blurred when you have things that happen like the flood, huge flood that took out track from the Omaha area down through Kansas City. In 1993, we had trains running everywhere that you could find a dry stick of track. And so a lot of issues, and you have to know your territory extremely well to understand what the crew availability is, what the capacity of the line is, what switches open where, and which train tracks intersect and where. So that can be a very, very interesting time. And so we pulled a lot of 20, 24-hour days during the disasters. Where do you go when things go boom on the lower end of the Feather River Canyon that you can't get up to Ketty? Well, this is the Valley sub. And so we ran up the Reading side, Valley, Dunsmuir, in the Cantera Loop. Fires have been just really hurting the West a lot. And so other detours happen with fires in the Feather River Canyon and California. And so detours always come back to the trackage rights people and writing temporary trackage rights agreements, etc., for those pieces. And so fires can be pretty ugly at times. I would like to open up the meeting to questions. If you do have questions, I will be very glad to try to answer those for you. I do thank you very much. Thank you for the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club for the honor of being able to present again. And I do greatly appreciate your time tonight. Open it up for questions there, Nathan.
All right, should be open. Like I said, if you'd unmute, ask your question, and then go back on mute, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Hey, Bruce, great presentation. Chip here in Denver. The Glacier View has,
Yes.
have you heard anything about it being renamed like the Matt Rose?
I have not. A lot of my interior contacts
Yes.
have retired. So I have very little interior input at this point.
Okay, second question, real quick. Tesla, were they just shipping parts in or what were you shipping out?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, we did not ship cars out.
Okay.
But there's a lot of things that go into the batteries and the making of cars, and some of the raw materials that just really didn't need to be trucked in across Donner Pass and areas. So we would haul some things in for them. UP also does that. It's a good business for UP. They have taken back the lion's share of that business now, as I understand it, Chip.
Thank you.
Good. See you Friday.
You bet.
I
Other
had a
questions?
question or somebody
Yes.
else.
Go ahead, David.
You sometimes mention the word overhead. I was thinking that maybe there might be people that don't quite understand what that means in railroad terms.
Very good question. And I apologize for not saying it. Overhead rights is you can haul your train over the top of the rail, but you do not have any rights to any of the customers. And that's where overhead came from. So overhead rights, let's go back to the Central Corridor. BNSF has overhead rights from Denver to Oakland, Denver to Stockton on those routes. We have portions of the route where we have rights to customers. We have rights to all customers between Winnemucca and Elko. So we can service anybody out there. We also have rights to everyone in the Salt Lake City Basin if they were an industry that was established after 1995. So sometimes we have to go dig through the history and find out, can we really serve this customer or not? And then, of course, the other railroad, UP in this case, is going to say, no, you don't have rights to that one. So it's a challenge to definitely know your territory, know your customers, know the history, and keep very, very good records. Good question. Others?
You mentioned some of the commodity restrictions earlier in the negotiation of trackage rights. Is
Right.
that just usually the dimension, what plate the cars comply with, as well as the usual hazmat stuff, or does it get a lot more strange than that?
Gets a whole lot more strange. The Feather River Canyon, we can run whatever BNSF wants to run through the Feather River Canyon. So manifest or intermodal, whatever, we can do that. Yeah, going over Donner Pass, BNSF is limited to one manifest each way each day. And then there's stipulations as to what you can run as far as intermodal traffic. We cannot run automotive traffic across there. There's two reasons for that. And this is one that I had senior management on, as well as the marketing team. They wanted to run automotives to a new download at in Salt Lake City area. And they said, oh, we're going to go over Donner. That's the greatest thing. And what I had to go tell them is, you run the first car over there, and I will come to you and get a check from you for $6.28 million. And that's the cost of our share of lowering all the tunnels on Donner Pass and putting in second main. Now, if we ran them via Ketty, nope, no problem. And so we had to get with the IT department, and as I understand it, it's still in place that you cannot entrain a car that exceeds a certain height to go over the Donner Pass route. If it's routed over Ketty, whole different story. If UP detours the train on their own, it's not our fault. So, other questions?
Didn't we pay for all the tunnel enlarging on Tehachapi Pass, over Tehachapi? And they can't use it, and they can't run same stuff that we do over there?
That happened after I left, Joe. I am not sure of the stipulations. I know that was a bone of contention, and that was negotiated by the Western team, and I never got to find out. They kind of cut me out of the loop there, and I have not taken time to go to the STB files and look at the agreements to see if they're there.
I just heard that was the same kind of thing. If UP tried to run a double stack or something like that over there, they'd have to pay their share of that tunnel enlarging. But I don't know if that's still good or not.
I believe you are correct, Joe. It was turnabout when we wrote that agreement. It was still in negotiation while I was there before I retired 2013, and they were putting that language into that agreement just to poke the UP for what they did to us on Donner.
Yeah, and I think that they've also done some double tracking up there. Between Marcel and Waylong, they've connected those two and all that. I don't know who initiated that, whether it was BNSF or that was joint or not.
That was initiated by the BNSF, but the capital improvement was stipulated in a special agreement.
Okay. And I would think that would have been a joint thing, because that would have,
right.
Yeah,
it is, as long as it increases the fluidity of the train traffic, then capital expenditures traditionally are shared per how it's laid out in the agreement.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons we still have the bottlenecks on the joint line, is because it specifically states in the agreement that the person that owns the track has to pay for the agreements or pay for the improvements, regardless if it benefits them or not. So UP is not going to lay second track from Palmer Lake down to Monument or Academy, because they own the ground.
Yeah.
And it would not benefit them.
Speaking of the joint line, that horrible milepost arrangement, weren't the milepost opposite? Didn't the Rio Grande go one way and the Santa Fe the other way? So when you had a train order or something, you had to interpret which direction your mileposts were going.
That is very true, because the Rio Grande started 0 at Denver Union Station, and Santa Fe started at Kansas City.
Right. That's
And
that's what I
so,
understood.
yeah,
It
you
was
were
a
in the
mess.
700s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand it was a mess to keep track of all that.
And there's times that I would come out of Denver with 25 and 30 slow orders or work orders, Form Cs
Mhm.
and Form Bs, and try to put those in order
Yeah.
and try to remember what went where and
Yeah.
what milepost did you change over to the other carrier. And
Yeah.
it was a mess. We had several people overrun their authority. We had gangs on the wrong track. There was one morning I was coming north on a 77 train, and a Santa Fe gang got on at Castle Rock and went towards Larkspur on the Rio Grande side. And I came whipping around, coming off of Larkspur at 45 miles an hour. And I didn't have an order for them because they were supposed to be on the southward track.
Wrong track.
And picks and shovels and lanterns and people went everywhere.
It's like
Of course, we went into emergency as soon as I stopped. I put it in emergency, and that foreman came up just hotter than all get out. What are you doing? And I said, "What track are you supposed to be on? I don't have an order for you." And he said, "Well, I'm supposed to be over at Toma." And I just pointed out across the fireman's window, and I said, "That's over there on the other side of the freeway."
That's Santa Fe side.
That's
Oh
the
my
Santa Fe
God.
side. It's lucky we didn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great program. I enjoyed it very much.
It's an honor to be able to chat with you guys. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. We had some Milwaukee Road guys that went out and hired out there, and some of them didn't last too long, I think, because of what you were just describing. They ran into some issues.
They did.
Sure.
A couple of them got fired. I was one of the trainers that helped with the Milwaukee guys. The guys that we got to keep were good hags, good engineers, and we had a couple of conductors as well. They were good people.
Yeah, they came out of the Chicago area because I don't remember names now, but I remember them leaving, and then later on hearing that they had issues.
Yeah.
Great program, Bruce. That was fascinating. I've always stayed on the regulatory side, and I saw the paperwork side, but I never realized how much nonsense you could get into with the physical side.
It can be a challenge, and having an operational background gave me a great advantage being in trackage rights, because I understood what a train is and how dangerous it can be, et cetera, just like you do, Wally. And it's a challenge out there for the folks that come in there that have no idea what a boxcar is.
And I imagine it was a big help, you being a rail fan too, because you knew a lot more than just your territory.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more than one time.
Right.
I worked for Roland Breedenberg for quite some time, and Roland said, without your rail fan knowledge, we had been in a lot of poop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bruce, I thought of one other question.
Yes, sir.
You were at the UP facility. Is there a UP person in the BN dispatch facility at maybe Fort Worth or something?
There is. There was as of 2013, put it that way. We were mandated by the Surface Transportation Board to have a person in the Harriman Center. In fact, the agreement, not so much the agreement, but the ruling by the STB said that UP will pay the salary and benefits of the person in the Harriman Center. So my paycheck was paid by BNSF, but I billed it straight back to the UP. Now, that is not true for the UP in the NOC at Fort Worth. The language in the STB decision says that they may place a person into the NOC that has the same access as the BNSF person does. So they can go to the dispatchers, et cetera. the UP, for the most part, allowed their coal team from the joint operation in the Oren line to act as that party up until 2002 and they decided to invoke their option and put Joe Santa Maria down there in the center. Unfortunately, we did not give him a desk out on the NOC floor like he wanted. So his room, we gave him the same thing that UP gave us before I got the desk out there on the floor. I was in a broom closet.
Yeah.
Yes, myself and two other guys were in a broom closet. So we gave Joe Santa Maria a broom closet. About half the size of mine. So,
yeah. Are there still dispatchers at Spring, Texas?
Joe, I don't know.
I don't either, but I know that worked very well from some of the dispatchers who worked there, saying the coordination between the two railroads really helped out the Houston area, having those guys all in one room or one building there.
And we had that in 3 locations. We had San Bernardino and Kansas City as well. We had KCS, UP, and BNSF at Kansas City. And all 3 of those dispatch centers dotted line to me. And that was fun because I got to go see them. You know, I didn't do the day-to-day management of them, but still any issues that came up, they were under the auspices of the trackage desk to negotiate, because I'd fly down and there'd be a disagreement about, yes, we can do this, no, we can't do that. And so I'd have to go down there and carry the BNSF flag as to, okay, this is what we are going to do.
Can you imagine how much fun they're going to have with this CP or CN KCS merger? Oh my God. You know,
I was waiting for that comment.
Oh, well, you know, if it's CP, it's not as big a deal. If it's CN, everybody, all the other guys are just going to go nuts.
Yeah.
Isn't BNSF kind of neutral on that, Bruce?
That's another thing I have not heard. You know, it's, again, all of my close contacts have retired. And so, you know, Rollins gone, Rickershauser's gone, you know, Matt's gone, Carl's gone. I don't have the.
I hope nobody gets it, but if somebody has to get it, I hope it's a CP. So.
Yeah, that's an end-to-end merger. It'd be
right.
a lot cleaner,
Yeah.
be a lot less
mess.
Now the
mess
CN,
consolation.
CN just threw a big wad of money at it, and my brother owns KCS stock, and he's hoping that they just fight it out so he can make even more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just hate to lose a KCS.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, living here in Fond du Lac, I was sorry to see the WC go. So the CN, I have no love lost for the CNs. And being a Milwaukee Sioux CP retiree, yeah, I'll go for the CP, but the stockholders are going to probably go for the CN.
Yeah. When I was down in Fort Worth, I also, under the area that I took care of, was locomotive use and liability agreements, as well as run-through agreements. And the second hardest folks to negotiate with is the CN. And now the NS is by far the first on, especially a locomotive run-through agreement. That agreement started being renegotiated back in, I think, 1982 or 3. And as to my knowledge, it is still under negotiation. Never got consummated.
But they're NS engines all over the BNSF.
That's the old agreement. Yeah, it's still under the old agreement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. On our slideshows on coming up here on Friday, Tom Lombrook is now at over at CP, and we chuckle about some of the things that happened with NS, and especially destroying a BNSF locomotive on NS, and they're gold plated under the old agreement. Yep. Oh man, you better put everything in the world on that engine and paint it gold.
Now, that's almost the subject of a whole nother presentation, because you break my choo-choo and the world's going to stop. So,
yeah. Well, I'll throw this out there, and I've already talked to David and Nathan about this, is I do have another presentation that can be on the books at some point if there's interest. And that's joint facility agreements, which covers all of it. And so if you guys are interested in doing that, that offer is out there. Just let Dave and Nathan know, and one of these days we'll do another one.
At least speaking for us, Bruce, we're definitely interested.
Well, thank you.
Like I said in email to you earlier, this is a side of railroading that we very rarely get to see. I mean, we get a lot of people from the operations side, but the actual, business and how you run a railroad is a side we don't get a lot of, and it's deeply appreciated for you to present this.
I'm honored to do that. Thank you very much. You're a great group to work with.
Great show. Yeah. I mean, because your perspective is pretty unique just in all the places you've been, just from what you showed us, even in your photos there. Did somebody else have another question about this topic?
Yes. I just wanted to comment about, it was very enlightening for learning about the trackage rights and such, for sure. I'm working up in the Como project, and we've actually running into some of that issue there too, but because we got different properties and who's got trackage rights on what there. But I also wanted to thank the BNSF has been absolutely so helpful with the project. From Nick up in Longmont were helping us, and it's just been really great. So wanted to throw that out there too. Thanks.
BNSF has got a heart.
UP hasn't come up with anything. They've just ignored us completely.
Yeah.
That's good to hear that they still have that heart. And I know Joe worked tirelessly to show that in his team.
I think, it's a corporate culture, and I'm very happy to have seen it drift into the BNSF. I was afraid it wouldn't, but from what I see, it has. I'm very happy with that.
Yeah.
Well, those guys like Nick that work out of Longmont, they still kind of consider that the CNS line, So yeah. I think that's along the same way there.
Yeah, before that, wasn't it UP before the CNS?
Yeah, UP, and then it became CNS, and then CB&Q in 1910. So.
Right. Now the photography you showed was excellent, and I wish I could get to places in the Powder River that I can't, because you did. But yeah. So you had great photography. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ron. I appreciate it. It really helped to be a trackage rights guy or joint facilities guy, because you're right. You just can't go everywhere you want to go in the PRV. And so when I went out there on the business trips, I would give them the make, model, color, license number of the vehicle that I got in Denver. I'd call a chief dispatcher and says, here I go. I'll be up there for the next X number of days. And I would get called in. I pull off of the county road. It wouldn't be 30 seconds. I'm called in. And, it's you hear them call and, hey, get the cops out here. Yeah, we got this, white Explorer out here doing, we don't know who it is. And then chief dispatcher would come on and says, that's all right, Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Give me the license number. And they'd tell him the license number. He says, that's Barrett from Fort Worth. Don't worry about it.
Things have changed. I was up there years ago and drove the whole thing from south to north on the right-of-way road all the way up there. So I'm sure things have changed since then.
Yeah. I agree. So, but there's a good reason, and just a bad apple spoils a lot of stuff for the rest of us.
Yeah.
But I sure can't go do that now.
Yeah. But there's still plenty of places to shoot trains up there.
There are, and I'm glad I know them.
Yeah.
That was one thing I scoped out when I was working up there, is where can I go legally?
Yeah. You still can do a good job up there.
Yeah. Other questions, comments?
I had,
Chance of getting
ahead.
back together in person, basically for Nathan or Denny?
I can answer that. I spoke with the lady at our church meeting hall where the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club typically has met for umpteen years, and they kind of have to wait for the okay from the bishop. So she said maybe September. I mean, we will let everybody know in the Rail Report newsletter when we can go back, and I know lots of people are eager to go back to that. There's also been questions. How come we don't see this? There's also been questions about whether we could do a combination of these Zoom meetings and live meetings. We are still trying to work out whether logistics for that could work. Also, if there's no other questions for Bruce, there was a thing that I mentioned. I spoke earlier about talking with the UP Steam folks, and one thing I forgot to mention was that they have been using their downtime since they couldn't run trains during the pandemic. Ed told me that they've painted the roundhouse for the first time in many years, and probably for the first time since the 50s. Some of the whisker tracks off the turntable have been upgraded with some new wooden ties, and they've also worked on the turntable itself, the control house and that. So they have been making some improvements while they were not able to run steam trains. So that's good. This is probably all things that needed to be done. Anybody else have any other comments?
I just have a question for you, Dave. How can I sign up for this thing on the 16th out at the museum? I don't see anything to sign up with, or where to send my check or whatever.
I missed mine too.
The deadline was May 9th, Joe. Sorry.
What?
I'm pretty sure I told you that last week, but
No. So I can't go?
well, if we make an exception for you, then there's 29 people behind you. So I'm not sure what to tell you.
Okay. All right. Okay. I
Well,
never
well, maybe I
saw a place to sign up or anything.
well, maybe I could scalp my tickets.
Well, there you go, Wally.
There you go, Wally. Buy low, sell high.
Yeah. Joe, there's your buddy Wally looking to make a buck off you. So, of course, just remember, all of this is on YouTube, so the rest of the world can see this for the next several
Wonderful.
years.
Wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is Keith Johnson, the treasurer. We're got a lot of people already signed up for it. This is going to be a pretty big event.
Okay.
And I saw the last one come in on the 9th.
Okay. No problem. I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, sorry, we tried to get that out to everybody and it did come kind of fast, but we got food now ordered and some other stuff. So anyway, hopefully we can do some more of these, but this is the first one David got put together, and looking forward to doing that. And we sure appreciate it, Bruce, and certainly we would like to hear about possibly on some of the facility agreements. So maybe we can talk about that down the road a little bit. So, because I'm the same way. This is a side that we never see very much of, and it is terribly interesting. So anyway, I don't know if anybody else has any other questions, but it's getting to be 9. Probably should think about rolling out of here. So Dave, Nathan.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thanks for everything you guys did. This is really good.
Well, thanks again to Bruce Barrett. It's a unique show. I don't think anybody else has your
Indeed.
perspective, Bruce.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's an honor to be able to do this for you guys.
Good job. Good job.
Thank you, Joe.
All right.
All right.
Well, next month, we will hear from Robert Holzweiss down in Texas. He will tell us what he knows about the specially painted Union Pacific Unit 4141 that was a tribute to George Bush, Bush 4041, as the engine number shows you. And we will be announcing soon the other programs coming up after that. We're also, there's a lot, most people know there's a lot going on this summer with narrow gauge specials down at both the Durango and Silverton and the Cumberson Toltec, the things going on in Como. So there's a lot of things coming up, not necessarily Rocky Mountain Railroad Club things, but we will try to keep at least our members up to date with our newsletter. And you can also find out things if you're not a member by looking at our website and our Facebook page. And I guess with that, we could sign off unless somebody else has something else.
So the one other thing I had to add is that the 2021 grant recipients will also be announced at the June meeting. So if you're interested in seeing what projects we'll be supporting this summer, be sure to tune in.
Sounds good. Hope to see you all in June.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Good night, all.
Good night,
Thank you.
all.
Good
Good
night.
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 See you next time.